All right. Good afternoon. This morning, as you heard, our Syria envoy, Geir Pedersen, as well as the Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, Tom Fletcher, both briefed the Security Council via video link from Damascus, where they both are currently. Mr. Pedersen told council members that we must ensure that the political process remains on track. Otherwise, he fears new instability. He added that while Resolution 2254, he reiterated that while Resolution 2254 identified two parties, one of whom has been toppled and cannot feature in the process, it is still the case that a political transition is needed and that this will require an inclusive intra-Syrian process. Mr. Pedersen said he discussed these elements in depth with the caretaker authorities in Damascus. He underscored that the transition must be credible and inclusive, and there must be a new constitution in line with Resolution 2254. He also discussed the fact that there must be free and fair elections in accordance with international standards. For his part, Tom Fletcher said that Syria had already one of the largest humanitarian crises in the world, where 17 million people, that's more than 70% of the population, is in need of support. The recent escalation is only added to these needs, with more than 1 million people displaced in less than 2 weeks. You will have seen the Secretary General's statement that we issued yesterday, in which he said he had sent Tom Fletcher to Damascus to engage with the caretaker authorities on scaling up the humanitarian assistance in Syria. Mr. Fletcher reported that the authorities in Damascus have committed to what will be an ambitious scaling up of vital humanitarian support, adding that we have received assurances that will facilitate movement of aid personnel and supplies from neighboring countries, including Turkey, Jordan, Lebanon, and Iraq, for as long as humanitarian operations require it. The Secretary General welcomed these developments that he said will make it easier for our aid operations to resume. We are already seeing the fruit of these discussions. Mr. Fletcher also noted that aid operations are now gradually resuming across most of our UN hubs, including Aleppo, Homs, and Damascus itself. Tomorrow, Mr. Fletcher will travel to Aleppo, after which he plans to visit Idlib, where humanitarian needs are amongst the most severe. And the update from our peacekeeping colleagues on the Golan Heights, where UNDOF continues to implement its mandate of observing and reporting from its positions throughout the area of separation. However, the Israeli Defense Force presence in its area of operations has severely impacted the Blue Helmets' freedom of movements and its ability to conduct its operational, logistic, and administrative activities. UNDOF's movements remain severely constrained in the current context. UNDOF used to conduct approximately 55 to 60 daily operational tasks and logistics activities. It's currently restricted to 3 to 5 essential logistics movements per day, which significantly impacts its operations. It's imperative that UN peacekeepers are allowed to carry out their mandated tasks without obstruction and in a safe and in a secure manner. UNDOF reports that the IDF has entered the area of separation and deployed at key locations, including Mount Hermon, and at least 9 other positions inside the area of separation. At one position, known as Tank Hill, east of the Bravo line. The mission has also observed IDF movements and construction at 4 locations in the Mount Hermon area. UNDOF has also observed Israeli flags at three positions inside the area of separation. All Israeli flags have been removed after a protest from UNDOF officials. The mission has consistently called on all parties to maintain the ceasefire, refrain from any action in violation of the 1974 disengagement agreement, and to respect UNDOF and the mandate it has. The mission maintains its liaison with the Israeli Defense Force to ensure that it continues to carry out its operational activities without any hindrance to its freedom of movement in order to fully implement the mandate. And staying on the peacekeeping front, but moving slightly to the west, our UNIFIL peacekeeping colleagues report that Lebanese armed forces continue to strengthen their deployment, including in Qiyam in Sector East and Tyre in Sector West. The Lebanese armed forces have established temporary checkpoints and are conducted road clearing operations and detonations of unexploded ordnances, which, as you know, pose a great risk to the population, especially children in these cases. The Israeli Defense Force, for its part, meanwhile, continues to conduct operations in southern Lebanon against what they state are Hezbollah targets, and they're restricting entry of people to villages close to the Blue Line, including Nakora. UNIFIL peacekeepers continue their operational tasks, including the maintenance of logistical routes and resupplying its various bases along the Blue Line. The mission also continues to engage with the IDF to coordinate its movements and the Lebanese armed forces and humanitarian missions in the area of operations. Meanwhile, today, our special coordinator for Lebanon, Janine Hennes-Plaschert, met with religious and community leaders in north of Lebanon, in Tripoli. She reiterated the readiness and commitment of the United Nations to continue to support all efforts aimed at consolidating Lebanon's security, stability, and advancing its long-term recovery. Turning to the situation in Gaza, our colleagues at the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tell us that UN-led aid missions to North Gaza Governorate continue to be overwhelmingly denied, especially those seeking to reach besieged areas in Beit Lahiya, Beit Hanun, and parts of Jabalia. OCHA reports that today 3 humanitarian missions planning to bring food and water to parts of besieged North Gaza were once again denied by Israeli authorities. The situation around getting missions in the north remains extremely challenging. As the Israeli siege on North Gaza continues, OCHA stresses once again that civilians who remain there must be protected and their essential needs must be met. Meeting their essential needs also means facilitating the work of the UN and our humanitarian partners who've been trying to deliver food, water, health, and other critical assistance, only to see missions denied or impeded. For its part, however, the World Health Organization said it did manage to reach Kamal Adwan Hospital in North Gaza Governorate on Saturday, despite ongoing hostilities and explosions in the vicinity of the hospital. In a social media post, the head of WHO, Dr. Tedros, said that 4 other WHO missions planning to reach the hospital were arbitrarily denied over the past week. This included efforts to redeploy an international emergency medical team, which had to self-evacuate from the hospital 11 days ago, as you'll recall, due to the ongoing fighting. The team that did reach Kamal Adwan on Saturday was able to deliver 5,000 liters of fuel. It was also able to deliver food as well as medicines. They also transferred 3 patients and 6 of their companions to Al-Shifa Hospital. However, WHO said that hostilities around Kamal Adwan and recent attacks have further damaged the hospital's oxygen supplies and its generators. Turning to Sudan, the Secretary General's personal envoy for Sudan, Ramtan Lamamra, is in Nouakchott in Mauritania to attend the 3rd consultative meeting on enhanced coordination and peace initiative and efforts for Sudan, close quotes. Those discussions will start tomorrow, Wednesday. This 3rd meeting is an important opportunity to discuss the status of good officers, mediation efforts, and various peace initiatives in the spirit of coordination and unity, with the purpose of restoring peace and stability in the Sudan. The consultative group comprises of high-level representatives from the AU, the European Union, IGAD, which is the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, the League of Arab States, as well as key countries with peace initiatives on Sudan. Those include Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the United States of America. On the humanitarian situation, I think you had asked me, I think it was Edie, about food assistance going to El Fasher in North Darfur. Unfortunately, our colleagues at WFP confirmed that nothing is going into El Fasher. Recent operational progress is fragile as the situation on the ground remains volatile and it remains dangerous. However, WFP is doing everything possible to expand assistance to all areas at risk of famine. A WFP convoy reached Kalma camp in Belay in South Darfur, which is another location at risk of famine, carrying 178 metric tons of food and nutrition assistance to nearly 15,000 people. This convoy was originally destined for Zamzam camp, but was redirected by WFP due to insecurity along the route it was traveling. The convoy left Port Sudan on November 12th and traveled via Daba into the Darfur region. The agency reports that it delivered food assistance to more than 800,000 people in famine and famine risk areas as part of a large-scale surge of food aid, including in Zamzam, Abu Shouk, and Al-Salam IDP camps in North Darfur and other areas, as well as locations in Khartoum, including Jebel Awliya and Tuti Island. This accounts for nearly half of the 1.7 million people either facing famine or at risk of facing famine. WFP is pushing to get vital food and nutrition assistance to 14 hunger hotspots, many in embattled locations across Darfur, Kordofan, Khartoum, and Al Jazeera states. Despite 20 months of fighting, conflict continues to get worse, and people continue to pay the price. Turning to Southern Africa and Cyclone Chido, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tell us that according to preliminary figures, at least 174,000 people have been impacted since the cyclone made landfall in the country over the weekend. The National Disaster Management Authority in Mozambique tells us that at least 34 people have been killed and more than 300 injured. Our teams on the ground report significant damage, with housing in some districts completely wiped out. Critical infrastructure is also severely damaged. In Mikufi district, medical professionals are having to operate from a school under extremely poor conditions. We, along with our partners, are scaling up the response despite critically low humanitarian supplies. The UN Refugee Agency is providing essential items, including blankets, sleeping mats, mosquito nets, and emergency shelter supplies to more than 2,600 people sheltering at the largest accommodation center in Pemba, which is the capital of Cabo Delgado province. Additional funding is urgently needed to sustain humanitarian response at a time where Mozambique is grappling with drought and conflict. As you know, in the island of Mayotte was also severely hit. Our colleagues at UNHCR are telling us, because there's a large asylum seeker population there, that there was devastating damage and increased risk for vulnerable communities, including asylum seekers and refugees. Our humanitarian colleagues are telling us they're following the situation on Mayotte with concern, and they remain in close contact with French authorities and stand ready to provide any support needed. And an update from Vanuatu, which is, suffered from a large earthquake just west of the capital, Port Vila. We're obviously closely monitoring the situation, coordinating with our partners to support the government-led response. Our team on the ground is coordinating with local disaster responders and the National Disaster Response Agency to assess urgent needs to prioritize aid efforts. Preliminary reports from authorities indicate damage to buildings and infrastructure. The government reports at least 14 deaths, more than 200 people injured. Key immediate needs include healthcare, shelter, access to clean water, and the restoration of emergency communications. Yesterday, you heard from Lisa Doughton, the director, or rather the Security Council, and you as well, heard from Lisa Doughton, the Director of Financing and Partnership Division at the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. She briefed the Security Council on the situation in Ukraine, noting that daily attacks continue, inflicting death, injury, and untold suffering on ordinary Ukrainians, and destruction and damage to civilian infrastructure. In 2024, more than 630 humanitarian organizations provided at least one form of assistance to 7.7 million people across Ukraine. Tomorrow, we will have as our guest from Ukraine, Matthias Schmal, our resident and humanitarian coordinator in Ukraine. He will join you virtually from Kyiv. And finally, no money, but I do want to take notice that there is a party going on in Vienna as we speak, and that's to honor Martin Nesirky, who is retiring at the end of the year. So today is a good day to publicly acknowledge my esteemed predecessor. As you know, Martin was Ban Ki-moon's spokesperson from 2009 to March 2014, when he physically handed over a baton to me at this very podium. Moving to Vienna, Martin revitalized the communications of the UN's Vienna International Center, opening its doors even wider to the public and to our partners. He was a tough act to follow at this podium. His deep knowledge about the vast work of the UN and his legendary attention to detail are things I can only envy. not to mention his punctuality at this podium, which are things that you can envy and only regret. Martin, as you know, always went the extra mile, literally the extra mile for his work. Some of you may not know, but he helped Ban Ki-moon get in running shape ahead of the London Olympics, where the then Secretary General ran the torch relay. And he was also an underappreciated dancer. Some of you may recall his twerking performances at their various UNCA galas. Most of all, during his time at the UN, Martin dedicated himself to the ideals of the United Nations. He did it with passion and dedication. And I know all of you who asked Martin many questions during this time here will join me in wishing him the best. Edith.
Thank you, Steph. And first, on behalf of the United Nations Correspondents Association and those of us who knew and worked with Martin, we wish him very good, fun, happiness, and think about us sometimes in the next chapter of his life.
And he beat you to retirement.
Yes, that's true.
as many people have. Yeah. Edith, please.
Two questions. First, does the convoy that made it to Kamal Adwan, is that the only one that's actually gotten into northern Gaza? So that means still no food, for any of the estimated 65,000 people there.
That is my understanding. That's correct.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, Gabriel.
Thanks, Steph. Does the Secretary General have any comment about the Russian general that was assassinated in Moscow? The Ukrainian intelligence service has claimed responsibility for it.
Yes, we have seen. Yes, we are aware of the reports regarding the incident that took place in Moscow today, where that led to the death of two Russian military officials. We urge all parties to exercise restraint and refrain from actions that could further escalate tensions.
Thanks. And on Gaza, there are some unconfirmed reports, which we've heard before as well, of a potential breakthrough in the ceasefire talks. Has the Secretary General heard those reports? Has he been in contact with anyone?
Yes, I mean, we're following those reports closely. Our colleagues on the ground in Jerusalem are in touch with various parties.
And last one is on Geir Pedersen's. During his remarks to the Council, he said the needs are immediate and could only be addressed with broad support, including a smooth end to sanctions. And then he said, also appropriate action on designations when it comes to the new administration. I think he was talking about designations on the terrorist list. Why don't you guys just come out and say that you want them delisted?
Look, I think listen, there is the message is that we have a new situation on the ground. I think it's time for all concerned to take a look at sanctions, listing, whatever you want, to see how we can best help the Syrian people. It's time to have a serious discussion and a think about all these things. Senor.
Steph, Pedersen and Thompson
Fletcher.
Fletcher, sorry, are still in Damascus. Have the new authorities requested formally to appoint a new representative here at the UN? Second, on the same subject, the Syrian representative, the former one, was still today at the Security Council. He didn't speak, but he is still representing his country.
Listen, as far as I know, the issue did not come up in Mr. Pedersen's discussions, and it's not for a UN official to discuss those things with authorities in capital. What I can tell you is that, as of now, there's been no changes in the representation of Syria here at the UN. Stepping back, if any member states wants to challenge the credentials of any other delegation, whether for the Security Council or the General Assembly, that has to go through the Credentials Committee. But no, we have not received any instructions to change anything here. So as far as we know, the situation, the representation remains the same.
And again, on that, if that happens, what's the procedure? I mean, how long does it take, and what's the procedure to follow?
Well, the procedure goes to the Credentials Committee, which can take a little bit of time, but we've not heard of any challenges, and we have not received any communications from Damascus saying that there was a change in any way. Abdelhamid, then Daji, then Ephraim, and then Pam.
Thank you, Stéphane. In June, France and France and the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan are planning an international conference to enforce or to implement the two-state solution in the UN headquarters. Is the UN involved in the planning for this international conference?
I'm sure we're in discussion with them, but I don't have any, I mean, it's far away from now. I don't have any details. I'm not aware of any details as of now.
Could you update us if
I
you...
can try, yes.
Thank you. Recently, Morocco declared that two of its soldiers had been killed on the border in Western Sahara. Did you receive any report from MINURSO about the same incident so we can know
Let
what
me check.
happened exactly?
I have not, but I will check with our peacekeeping colleagues.
Thank you.
Deji?
Okay. First, today in the Security Council, many member states actually mentioned that the sanctions that against Syrian people should be lifted. Now, due to the situation that Assad has already gone, the government, does the UN feel the same? Should those countries who put sanctions on Syrian people that because of this, what they call brutal regime, now can be lifted?
I mean, this is something Mr. Pedersen spoke about as early as Saturday last weekend, which is time to rethink the sanctions, and he's urging those countries, mostly, I mean, the U.S. and the European Union, to start rethinking this issue, given that the needs of the Syrian people are so great at this time.
And secondly, I just received this story. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu today said that Israel force will stay in the buffer zone on the Syrian border until another arrangement is found that will ensure Israel's security. You know, last week we heard that it's a temporary measure, but it seems this temporary measure to have this buffer, to expand the buffer zone would be long. Any reactions?
The presence of the Israeli Defense Forces in the buffer zone is a violation of the 1974 disengagement agreement. And we report on that. We just did. In fact, I just did proactively a few minutes ago. There is an agreement. It needs to be respected. And, you know, occupation is occupation. Whether it lasts a week, a month, or a year, it remains occupation.
Would UN think about maybe another arrangement?
Well, it's not about the UN thinking of another arrangement. It's about right now member states respecting the agreements that are in place. Ephraim.
Thank you so much, Steph. Deji asked my question, but just for a little bit of clarification about the sanctions, some people like the Chinese envoy are calling for immediate lifting of the sanctions. Pedersen is talking about smooth transition leading to the end of sanctions. I wonder if you just have what the UN thinks needs to happen for sanctions to be lifted.
We need to find ways to support the Syrian people as quickly as possible so they can get the medicine, the food, the basic building blocks that are needed for rebuilding a country. We have heard different reactions from the US and the EU on these things, but we think it's a process that should get underway.
Okay, and one quick one on the independent institution on missing persons in Syria. It's been, I think, a year and a half exactly since it was established. One, what's taking so long for it
I-
to start its work?
uh,
And second, is it being looked at now with a sense of urgency, given the prisons?
I hope we would be able to announce something soon. Pam, and then I'll come back to you.
Yes, thanks, Steph. Follow-up to the last Ephraim's question, which is, what is the process? What do you have to determine here to lift the sanctions?
Well, the sanctions are not.
I mean, it would have to go to the Security Council
The sanctions, when people refer to sanctions,
on
they refer
HTS.
to, my understanding is sanctions imposed, bilateral sanctions imposed by the U.S., the European Union, and maybe,
There are no
and
UN
maybe
sanctions.
others. There's a whole issue relating to HTS here in the Security Council. That goes through the Security Council. We can share with you by email the process on how that lifting would work, but that's a Security Council member state matter.
Okay, and then that was a follow-up. My question is, the HTS has been showing homes with significant illicit drug caches of Cantona, I can't even pronounce it. Anyway, a drug. Captagon, thank you. Is there any request, or is there any thought about getting UNODC there to evaluate, to see what's going on? I mean, they're obviously trying to get rid of it, and what is there anything that could go on?
There's a lot of work for many UN agencies moving forward on Syria, how we support the Syrian people. UNODC is clearly one. Our human rights colleagues are following the situation closely and maybe sending a small team there in the near future. I think you heard the IIIM chief, Robert Petit, brief from Geneva, talk about him going soon. Also on issues on the protection of and the promotion of the rights of women and girls. There's a lot of work to be done, and obviously as the security situation unfolds, hopefully for the better, I think you will see more UN officials and UN agencies wrapping up their work under the leadership of the resident coordinator in Damascus.
And just to add, I hear here to the Martin, congratulations and good luck. Thank you.
Thank you. Edie.
Just a quick one on Geir Pedersen. Is he planning to stay in Damascus? He's issued invitations to a dialogue to avoid.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to be in Damascus for a short while longer, and then probably heading back to Geneva. There's no trip planned to New York this week. Deji.
Okay, a follow-up first. Will there be any chance that Mr. Pedersen would join us for the briefing?
I tried for today.
Okay.
My magic is obviously is not what Edie thinks it is.
You need to increase your magic power then.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. My questions. I have two other questions concerning social media. I bet you know that TikTok now is facing a bill that passed by the U.S. Parliament that it might be banned next January. Just wondering, what's the position of the UN on this over hundreds of millions of users platform being banned here in the States?
We don't have a position on the particular commercial issues that are raising TikTok here. What I can tell you, and I think the Secretary General said it in a video message recently, what we want is a free, open, and accessible internet for all.
And UN has an account on TikTok, right?
I don't think we have a corporate account.
Okay, cool. Okay, the second question concerning social media. Last month, Australia passed a bill that forbids children under 16 to create accounts on Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, etc. Does the UN think this is a good direction to let's say regulate or to protect children?
I'm not going to comment on that particular legislation. Abdelhamid.
There are news saying that Netanyahu is on his way to Cairo, I'm not sure, to seal of a deal about ceasefire. Can you share with us
No,
any
I mean, I think
information you have?
Gabriel asked the same question. Obviously, our colleagues in Jerusalem are in touch with various parties. They're aware of the situation. I think it's not, at this delicate moment, it's not the right time to speculate. Yeah. Yes, senor.
On the Chido cyclone, the French media are saying that there are hundreds of missing people in Mayotte. Only the Red Cross, the local Red Cross or French Red Cross, they are fearing that 200 people are missing. You don't seem so categorical when you spoke.
No, we don't have, listen, we don't have better numbers than what the French authorities on the ground are giving. So, signore, excuse me.
Thank you. My name is Massimo
Your
Basile.
microphone a little closer.
My name is Massimo Basile with AGI, Italian agency, news agency. So quickly. Today, the Italian defense minister, Crosetto, said that in a peace scenario, only the UN peacekeeping forces should be deployed at the border between Ukraine and Russia, just to prevent further conflicts and enforce peace agreements. Do you agree with that, and why? Thank you.
We're not in the business of speculating. What we want to see is an end to the conflict in respect for General Assembly resolutions, international law, territorial integrity of Ukraine. Obviously, we will. The Secretary General has been very clear. We will play a supporting role in whatever way we can within the parameters of the Charter in supporting peace in Ukraine, peace between Ukraine and Russia. Stefano Vacara.
Thank you, Stéphane. We know that you will inform us, but just in case you forgot, did the President-elect Trump had any contact with the Secretary General?
I forget lots of things. If that had happened, I would not have forgotten it. On that note, bon appétit, buenos dias.